How many years did you work on just short films?
I did short films in college, of course. So that was going back to, well, I'll put it this way. I've been making short films since I was a kid with the old block camcorder that had to be plugged into the wall. But if we're talking about real films with crews, professional or at least semi-professional, I think my first was in 99 or 2000. I took about a 4-year break once I moved to Los Angeles, didn't know anybody, didn't have any money, so I needed to put some pieces together. And once I did that, that probably was 2005. And I think my last short film, to date at least, would have been a fun little crime action film called Sweet Madness, which I believe was 2015. So a good solid 10 years of just non-student, we're not talking student films or kid films, like me going out there, pulling in investors and producers, pulling the crew together, and just getting it done. It was probably a good solid 10, 11 years.
So that 4 years that you came here and you weren't making films, what was that like? Because you'd planned, you'd been making films since you were a kid, you go to film school in a really cool town, and then you come here and essentially you probably feel like, oh wow, now I'm going to be living what I set out to do. But...
Well, reality hits. As much as I loved the film school, again, it didn't prepare you to go into this industry, not in Los Angeles. I came out, in a sense, cold turkey. I'd been taught how to load some mags, and I wrote like a short film script in my senior film class, but I didn't know how to pull a crew together. I didn't know how to produce. I didn't know about permits. I didn't know anything about any of it. I knew I had to learn it though. I also didn't have any money. I had to get a job. Pretty soon you find yourself working a job or two. And then I tried, I was doing that. I got some internships on the side to try to meet people, figure out how the business worked. I eventually got a job at a literary agency representing writers and directors and so on and so forth to learn that side of the business. I started to put together my long-term plan at that point. I wanted to know who was who in the town. I wanted to know how contracts worked, what was fair, what wasn't fair. I wanted to learn how these people got representation, what it took. And it just took time to get these things in place. And while I was doing these jobs, I had access to no gear. I didn't have money to pay for gear. I didn't know people to ask. They'd come and volunteer. I had no press, no brand to sell myself, to get people to want to work with me for nothing. So it took a number of years to get to a place where I was like, okay, I'm as close as I'm going to be. I mean, I could wait another 10 years, but I'm as close as I'm going to be to having the ability to do my first post-college film. And that was around 2005. I just eventually just pulled the trigger. I said, I'm doing it. I'll figure out the rest. At some point, you just got to go with it. And so I did. I made that film for about $7,000 or $8,000. That was the last film I shot on actual film. After that, everything went digital, and it saved me a tremendous amount of money. But yeah, that's something that film students and everything can and should be aware of. In terms of me, I just didn't know any better. I went to a film school that taught me some amazing things about the history of film, and I'm so glad I learned it. But I came out here like a baby. I didn't know anybody, didn't know anything, and had to learn everything on my own from the ground up, which has proved beneficial to me in the long run. But at first it was challenging. You just had to find your way and just go with it. With film, you can read 1 million books, but there's no simple A to Z about how to make it or how to be a producer or director or writer. So I kind of did it the only way I knew how. I learned how on set. And whatever mistakes I made, I learned from them and didn't do them again. But and everyone's got their own road. That was mine. So yeah, I had that little 4-year pause. And once that pause ended, I've been pumping out films ever since.
Were you working at the literary agency the entire 4 years?
No, what ended up, I worked at the literary agency for about 1.5 years. I interned at Paramount. I interned for some other producers in town. I worked at, I don't even remember the name of it. I worked at the mall. I worked at restaurants. I just worked.
Yeah.
You got to make your money.
Oh, sure.
But that taught me early on one of the most important lessons, which for me, I always knew what I wanted to do. There was no doubt about it. And I was prepared for it to be an uphill battle for the rest of my life. And it has been. I mean, being a filmmaker is hard in all the best ways to me. I think everything you really love and care about is hard. You know, it takes a lot of effort, and filmmaking certainly requires a lot of effort. But as I've been out here in Los Angeles, steadily working away and putting my pieces in place and kind of figuring out, okay, where is this going to lead me in 5 years versus 10 years? Like, where do I want to go and how am I going to get there? It took a while for me to figure out exactly what I needed to do. But throughout that journey, I saw a lot of people come out wanting to do the same. They wouldn't make it very long. And one of the most common traits I saw in the people who didn't make it very long were those who I don't think fully appreciated how hard filmmaking is. I think they loved film. I don't think they loved filmmaking. And it's an important difference. I think that if you come out to this town with stars in your eyes, and some of these things I've written about before, which you might have read some of my articles, but I think if you come out to LA to be a filmmaker and kind of the preeminent thought you have is fame and fortune, I think that's a fine motivation to have. But if it's your primary motivation, I think it's going to be disappointing for you, because the odds are of you making it big are slim to none. I think for me, and for most others, if you can sit there and tell yourself that I would do this for free the rest of my life, working side jobs. I'm never going to make a lot of money. I'm not going to have a big house in Beverly Hills. I'm not going to, mingle with the stars. If you can tell yourself that I would be happy just making stories, small films that maybe will go to some festivals, but that's about it, and you're okay with that, as let's say a worst case scenario, that's all you're ever going to do, and you're okay with that, I think you're on your way. That's a very good place to start. If you do achieve more and you aspire for more, I think that's perfectly fine. But to me, that's always been icing on the cake. It'll be a bonus. But I think at your core, you really need to love the process, because it's a challenging one and it's not for everybody.
Did you see anything that was eye-opening by working with these writers at the literary agency? I mean, I don't know how close you actually got to the writers. Maybe you didn't get that close to them, but just in terms of seeing the ones that, because I know there's writers that are frustrated with the whether they're novelists or whatever, and it's not what they thought, and they have editors totally controlling their book, and it's, so there's a lot of similarities.
I learned a lot of things working at the agency. I think in terms of your question, the most important thing I took out of it, from a strictly writing and directing standpoint, is that the fight never ends. Because it is very, very hard to get representation from a manager standpoint, but certainly from an agency standpoint. You pretty much have to be a moneymaker to get attention from an agency. Sometimes they'll take on someone who won a big festival because they believe in them and they see them as a good investment. But what would happen often is if an agent has, say, 30 clients, these are all people who've made it. They're talented people. They've broken through from that ocean of people. Even then, maybe the top 5 clients get time with the agents. Everyone else gets ignored for weeks at a time because they're not the big money. They're not making the big A-list movies with the hot new director or the established director. They, made something that won a big festival, Telluride or whatever it may be. Or they're a journeyman who's made some movies that have been successful here and there. But anyways, they're people who've made movies, many of which have been released theatrically. They've made it. They're still fighting. It's going to be a scrap, unless you're Spielberg or one of these upper echelon people. It's always going to be a scrap. And that was something I learned early on. I said, oh, so these guys, they made it. I mean, they fought the fight, and they emerged from 500,000 other aspiring filmmakers, and they made it. And they're still like, I need a job. Like, get me into a room. Let me pitch my script, whatever it is. So that was interesting to me. And I think both enlightening and I think advantageous. Because again, I was already kind of prepared, but it prepared me even more so to be okay with that, to be okay to never reach a point where I go, okay, boy, projects are being thrown in my lap left and right. This is great. That even after and here I am with Escape Room came out theatrically worldwide, opened up #1 in the UK, so it did pretty good. It was a small movie, but it did pretty good. I didn't have agencies calling me. No management companies called me. no entertainment attorneys called me. I'm still securing my own deals. And I'm getting more and more and better deals, but it's not like it opened the floodgates. So there's never like a door you open where it's easy from here on out. And I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear that, especially filmmakers.